In this tutorial, I'm going to show you a technique for creating a second layer of knitting for splitting stitches. On this little ghost toy, he is wearing what looks like a sheet sweater, but the layers are attached right here and split on this row. So this technique kind of creates a really not too visible splitting of the layers. I'm going to demonstrate it on this second version, it was a little bit more blue than the original. But what I've gotten to the point of the pattern where I have split, I've worked the circular yoke and I have split off stitches for the arms, and then I've worked a row of the body. And what I have done is taken a piece of waste yarn, and I like to use a worsted weight to thread through these fingering weight stitches because it just kind of fills it out and holds it a little bit more. But I've taken a piece of worsted weight yarn on a yarn needle and just thread it through all of the stitches of this round, so you can see it's not on the needles anymore. So now I'm going to show you how we go in and pick up the stitches from the inside of this round. So you want to pick up the stitch on the purl bump from the inside of each stitch. Let me grab a needle here. So I am using a smaller size needle than what I use to knit the body of this toy with, just for the purpose of picking up the stitches, and then I'll go back and use a regular size needle when working the first row. But what I'm looking for here is this little purl bump, and you'll see it at the base of each stitch on this row that is on waste yarn currently. So I'm going to take the tip of my right hand needle and just insert it into that purl bump there. Use my color A and knit that stitch just like that. And then I'm going to go on to the next stitch. Now the next stitch is worked in color D, but the purl bump at the base is still in that color A. So you do have to kind of work around the float that's behind it. We don't want to pick up the float, so I'm picking up the purl bump at the base of that stitch. Like I said, this is why it's nice to have a smaller needle, because you kind of have to maneuver into those purl bumps at the base of the stitch. It is easier to do when the original stitches are on waste yarn, because it makes the fabric really pliable and makes it easier to kind of manipulate into the back, into those purl bumps there. So what I'm going to do with this row is go all the way around and pick up the base of each stitch here. So you are just, you will end up with the same number of stitches as what is on your waste yarn. The stitches on the waste yarn should stay on the waste yarn for this whole process, and will stay until you need to come back and work them, which is later in the pattern. Okay, so I'm coming around to the end of the round. I've got 2 more to pick up. There's one, and that very last one. Kind of pull on that worsted scrap yarn so I can see the purl bump really nicely. And that is what it's going to look like once I've picked all of those stitches up. So I've got the same number of stitches that I originally had, 44 on the round, or on the body here. And so we've got some on waste yarn here, and those will just hang out and wait until we need them. And then we've got new stitches on the inner part of all of those original stitches. And so from here, the body will be worked in the round on these stitches that we picked up. And I'll remember to switch back to my normal size needles, just a couple sizes larger. So I'll work in the round for the body, and then I'll come back and show you how we pick up those held stitches to continue for the little ghost sheet. Okay, so once we've completed the body of the toy, the pants and the body in the round, we come back to getting these held stitches and putting them back on the needles so that we can work the front sheet that he's wearing. So we need to transfer all of these stitches back to needles, and we do that just by sliding our needle tip just carefully into all of these stitches. I like to do it with the waste yarn still in there, just because it makes me feel a little bit more safe, but you want to make sure to not pierce the waste yarn with your needle tip as you're running it through, or else you won't be able to pull it out. So once we, and I like to just automatically, put this on my 3 different double points for working in the round, or whatever needle setup you are using. Okay, one more to go. Just using my little needle tip here, climbing in the front of each stitch, making sure to stay away from that waste yarn. Okay, and if we've done it correctly, then we should be able to pull out our waste yarn. You can pull from the beginning. Sometimes I like to pull from these open corners just because it's a little bit less distance to pull through all right at once. So there's one needle out. Just going to reach in here. Smooth, very smooth. Okay, so now we've got all of our stitches back on the needles. I had left color D hanging here in the front of the work from earlier when we had worked the yoke. So it is still here waiting for me to work on the next couple rounds. If you cut it, which is completely fine, you'll just reattach it on this round. So the next round of the pattern has you picking right back up and working the next 2 rows of the chart. We had worked 1 row. You can kind of see the colors popping up here. And so you'll just attach your color A right here at the beginning and work the next 2 rounds. And then you continue to just work as normal kind of round. It's a little bit tricky on that first row because you are attached so closely to the fabric, but once you get a few rows out and you have a few increases on the stitches, then it'll feel a little bit more comfortable. So the sleeves are going to be worked in the same way. I'll come back and show you those in just a few moments. Okay, so now we've finished the body and the sheet on the little ghost, and we're going to pick up the stitches for the sleeves. There is a simple arm option where you simply slip these held stitches back onto needles and start working in the round, but I'm going to demonstrate how we pick up the stitches for the drapey sleeve option. And so what we want to do is make sure that the right side of the fabric is facing us. And then what we will do is just gently kind of fold this back, because what we're looking for as far as picking up the stitches is we're looking for the inside of each stitch and the purl bump that is sitting at the base of each of these stitches. That's what we're picking up from. The nice thing about the sleeves versus the body when we picked up stitches was we had to kind of fight around some floats on the body, but on the sleeves, all of these purl bumps are uniform and the same color, so it's going to make it a lot easier. I'm using a smaller needle size than I knit the toy with, the rest of the toy with. I'm going to reattach my color A here, and I am simply going to insert my needle into each little purl bump, just like so, and then knit a stitch based off of each purl bump. And so because we're picking up 1 stitch for every stitch, we will end up with the same number of stitches that we had on hold. I'm just working across just like this. That kind of smaller needle tip makes it really easy to get into each stitch. Just pick a few more here. This method of splitting the stitches is a really, it is easy to work. It's a little fiddly on like a small amount of stitches, but it looks so much nicer than a lot of other methods for, trying to create a double layer of knitting, just because you can't see it as much from the outside. So we're coming around here to our last couple ones. And then what we are actually doing with these stitches that we're picking up is knitting an inside arm, something that will be on the inside of the sleeve. And so once we pick up all of these stitches, then we can join to work in the round, and we're just going to knit a really simple inner arm. Just hold on to that guy and get that last one. Okay. So now that we've got the stitches, we're just going to, and I probably could have put them onto 3 needles instead of 2, but we're going to join this to work in the round, and then we'll just knit around and around on this small little circumference and make the inner arm. And then I'll come and show you what we do with the outer stitches. Okay, so in the last little part of this tutorial, what I'm going to show you is now that I've knit the inner arm for the ghost, now I need to go back and get these stitches and knit the drapey outer arm that, you know, kind of matches his little ghost sheet here. And so the first step is just to put these held stitches back onto double point needles. So we're not picking up from them this time, we're just sliding them back onto needles. So I'm just going to slip, let's see, make sure it focuses here. Slip those stitches. You can use a smaller needle for this too if you want. Personal preference. So I'm just going to slip these stitches onto a needle. Grab one here. You want to make sure to not pierce, let's see, it's not focusing. You don't want to pierce the waste yarn that is holding your stitches, otherwise you won't be able to pull it out. So make sure to get inside each stitch. There, let's pull that up, just like that. And then I'm just going to pull out that waste yarn. So now we've got all of these arm stitches back onto double points working around. So we're going to now work the outer part of the sleeve around this inner little arm. And when we picked up the inner arm, we did just pick up the number of stitches that was held. And so we worked with, I think it was 17. For the outer arm, I want the sleeve to be a little bit bigger so that it sits on the outside of the arm with a little bit of ease. So the directions will have you start with picking up 2 stitches first. So I'm just starting in here in the middle of the underarm. I'm going to reattach my color A, just like so. And that's going to be my first one, just right there in the middle. And then I'll just pick up this little stitch right here. It doesn't have to be too exact. This is a toy, right? So there's my second stitch, just like that. Okay, and then I will proceed to work around the sleeve. I'll be right back at the end. I'm just coming around. I've knit all of the stitches that were held on the needles and were placed back on the DP ends. I'm going to pick up one more stitch here at the end of the round from the underarm area. And then I am safe to join to work in the round here and proceed to work the outer part of the sleeve. And that is all of the steps for picking up the stitches on this little ghost toy. The pattern can be found in my Ravelry store, and I hope that that was helpful.